It was almost New Year's 1986. The air was filled with anticipation and excitement as people around the world prepared to welcome a new beginning. The streets were adorned with festive decorations, and the spirit of celebration was palpable. Everyone was excited and hopeful for the new year. Families gathered, friends reunited, and the promise of a fresh start was in the air. It was a time for joy, reflection, and looking forward to the future with optimism. But something terrible happened. Aero Air Flight 1285, full of American soldiers going home for the holidays, crashed soon after taking off from Gander, Canada. These soldiers, who had been serving their country, were looking forward to reuniting with their loved ones. This terrible accident made the holidays very sad for many people, and left a lot of unanswered questions. Families who had been eagerly awaiting the return of their loved ones were instead faced with unimaginable grief and sorrow. It reminded everyone how easily life can be lost, and how unpredictable things can be. The ticking of the clock and the flickering of a candle became symbols of the fragility of life, and the suddenness with which it can be taken away. The crash of Aero Air Flight 1285 is one of the worst plane crashes in Canadian history. The snowy landscape of the crash site was a stark contrast to the warmth and joy that the holiday season usually brings. It's a story of bravery and loss, of hope lost on a cold winter day. The soldiers who perished were honored for their service, but the pain of their loss was felt deeply by their families and communities. This sad event still reminds us how important airplane safety is, and how devastating these accidents can be. It led to renewed calls for stricter safety regulations and better oversight to prevent such tragedies in the future. The crash shocked people all over the world, leaving families heartbroken and communities grieving. The images of families hugging and crying at airports, and communities coming together for memorial services, were heart-wrenching. It also made people question how safe airplanes really were, especially in bad weather. The sight of airplanes flying through stormy skies and passengers looking out of windows with concern became a common fear. The investigation that followed was complicated and confusing, making things even harder for the families who had lost loved ones. The search for answers was long and arduous, adding to the pain and uncertainty that the families had to endure. Aero Air Flight 1285 started its journey in Cairo, Egypt. The bustling city, with its ancient pyramids and modern skyscrapers, was the starting point for a long journey that would take the soldiers across continents. On board were 248 American soldiers from the 101st Airborne Division. These brave men and women had been serving their country far from home, and the anticipation of reuniting with their loved ones was palpable. They were coming home after keeping the peace in the Sinai Peninsula. Their mission had been challenging, involving long days under the scorching sun and nights filled with uncertainty. They were excited to see their families and celebrate the holidays. The thought of home-cooked meals, festive decorations, and the warmth of family gatherings kept their spirits high. The soldiers had been away from their families for months, living in the harsh desert. The conditions were tough, with limited amenities and the constant threat of danger, but they had persevered with courage and determination. Finally, they were going home to the United States. The journey ahead was long, but the promise of home made every mile worth it. The flight stopped to refuel at Gander International Airport in Newfoundland, Canada. This small town, known for its hospitality, was a welcome sight for the weary travelers. Gander, a small town with friendly people, was used to travelers stopping by. The townspeople were always ready to lend a helping hand or share a warm smile. It was a regular stop for planes flying across the Atlantic Ocean. The airport had seen countless flights come and go, each with its own story and destination. For the soldiers on Flight 1285, Gander was a short break before the last part of their trip home. They stretched their legs, grabbed a quick bite, and prepared for the final leg of their journey. The soldiers were excited to be almost home as they got ready for the last part of their trip to Fort Campbell, Kentucky. The air was filled with chatter and laughter as they shared stories and dreams of the future. They talked and laughed, forgetting how tired they were because they were so close to home. The camaraderie among them was strong, forged through shared experiences and mutual respect. Christmas decorations on the plane reminded everyone of the happy times waiting for them. The festive lights and ornaments brought a sense of joy and anticipation, making the journey even more special. Everyone felt relieved and excited. The long months of separation were almost over, and soon they would be in the arms of their loved ones, ready to celebrate the holidays together. Gander in December is usually very cold and wintry. On that sad day, it was lightly snowing, covering everything in white. It wasn't a big snowstorm, but the weather wasn't good for flying. It was around freezing, and a light wind blew across the airport. The weather seemed okay, but there was a hidden danger. Ice. Ice is very dangerous for airplanes. It can form on the plane even when the temperature isn't that cold. Ice stops air from flowing smoothly over the wings, making it harder for the plane to fly. Pilots know how dangerous ice is and always check the weather and the plane carefully. We still don't know exactly what part ice played in the crash of Aero Air Flight 1285. Some investigators think ice on the wings, especially a kind of ice called clear ice, might have caused the crash. Clear ice is see-through and hard to see. It can form quickly and without warning, surprising even experienced pilots. At 6:45 a.m., Flight 1285 took off, a little later than planned because of the weather. At first everything seemed normal. The plane slowly climbed higher and higher. People watching from the ground said the plane looked like it was struggling to climb, pointing its nose up to stay in the air. Then, something terrible happened. The plane stalled, and the nose dropped as it couldn't stay up in the air. Flight 1285 fell from the sky and crashed into the woods less than a mile from the airport. The crash was devastating. The plane, full of fuel, exploded into flames, instantly killing all 248 soldiers and 8 crew members. The quiet morning was broken by the loud noise of the crash, and then an eerie silence. Black smoke rose from the crash site, visible for miles. The happy holiday feeling in Gander disappeared, replaced by shock and disbelief. As the sun rose, the full horror of what happened became clear. Rescue workers rushed to the crash site, but it was a terrible sight. The crash site was a burning mess of twisted metal and broken pieces of the plane. It was clear there was little hope of finding anyone alive. Even though it seemed hopeless, rescue workers kept working, trying to find the bodies of those who had died. It was difficult because of the rough ground and the scattered wreckage. The Canadian military and local volunteers worked together to bring back the remains of the people who died. The work was hard and very sad. The crash site was a reminder of the terrible loss of life. Every piece of the plane a memory of the people who died. But even in this awful situation, there were stories of kindness and strength. The people of Gander opened their homes to the grieving families who came from the United States, offering comfort and support during this very sad time. The crash of Aero Air Flight 1285 led to a huge investigation run by the Canadian Aviation Safety Board, or KSB. This tragic event shook the aviation world and demanded a thorough and meticulous examination to uncover the truth behind the disaster. The investigators had a very difficult job. They faced immense pressure from the public and the families of the victims, who were desperate for answers. The emotional toll on the investigators was significant, as they had to remain objective while dealing with the heartbreaking aftermath of the crash. They had to figure out what happened before the crash, looking at everything about the flight, from how the plane was maintained to what the pilots did. This involved analyzing flight data, examining airplane parts, and reviewing maintenance records. Every detail was crucial in piecing together the events that led to the tragedy. The KSB's first report said that ice on the wings was part of the problem, and maybe the pilots didn't remove the ice properly before taking off. The harsh winter conditions at the airport were a significant factor, and the investigators had to consider how the weather might have impacted the flight. But the United States National Transportation Safety Board, the NTSB, didn't agree with everything in the report. They conducted their own investigation and had different interpretations of the evidence. This disagreement highlighted the complexities and challenges of aviation accident investigations. The NTSB agreed there was ice, but they thought other things, like engine problems or mistakes by the pilots, could have also caused the crash. They suggested that a combination of factors, rather than a single cause, might have led to the disaster. This added another layer of complexity to the investigation. The investigation into the crash of Aero Air Flight 1285 became very complicated, leading to conspiracy theories and making the families even sadder. Some people believed that there was more to the story than what was being reported, and this speculation only added to the grief and confusion of the families. Some people thought it was terrorism, while others blamed poor safety rules. The debate over the true cause of the crash led to discussions about aviation security measures and the need for stricter safety regulations. This tragedy became a catalyst for change in the aviation industry. Not having clear answers made the tragedy even worse, leaving many questions unanswered. The families of the victims were left with a sense of incompleteness as they struggled to find closure. Memorial services were held to honor the victims, but the lingering doubts and unanswered questions continued to haunt those affected by the crash.